The cold rain beats down my head like 1,000 sniper bullets. My city is whinging in pain.
Bang, bang, bang. Ah! Get the man off of me!
Crime is the baby, and I am the doctor, telling my city, push, push, push.
I'm a pool shark over here. I'm an actual shark that plays pool. Kind of a funny... I'm in the wrong comic book.
Half a block away, an old man dies trying to fight a pimp. The city is nothing but kindly old men and pimps. But she is mine, and I am her protector.
I'm the yellow bastard. That's me. Teedly-too. A teedly-tee.
I have to admit, I kind of fell off the rails after the 90s. It's Frank Miller.
Yeah! Dun, 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 dun. Right? He deserves electric guitar.
Sexy ninjas.
Yes.
Burly men. Mm-hmm. Lots of prostitutes.
Dark situations. Everything is dark. Things are a problem. Frank Miller, here we go. Let's do this. Welcome to the Wizard, the Bruiser. Hut. I just,
wow.
I did a football
You're
hut.
hyped.
Yes, I'm super hyped. I got the coffee. You brought peanut M&Ms. Just giving everyone sort of an idea of where we're at right now. I am the Wizard, Stoneheart Holden McNeely.
And I am the Bruiser, Featherheart Jake Young.
And Jake, Frank Miller. I had a loads of fun researching this one this week.
Frank Miller is, one of the heavy hitters in American comics. We might end up repeating ourselves a lot from the Alan Moore episode because he was one of these guys that came at the pivotal point where the stale and old way of doing comics, that like the shackles that the Comics Code kind of put on the American superhero industry, and like finally broke the chains and kind of expanded the minds of what a superhero story can be.
And of course, some more crossover action for you. Gave us what we would come to know as the legendary, probably arguably greatest superhero of all time, Spawn. Ushered in the age of Spawn, as I call it. The Spawnden Age, as I call it. There was the Silver Age, the Golden Age, and then the Spawnden Age.
The more research I did about Frank Miller, the more I realized that like my entire life would be completely different without him, because without his Batman, we wouldn't have Cable, we wouldn't have Rob Liefeld, we wouldn't have the Dark Age of comics. I would have never gone into superheroes because it would have still been lame pajama men.
Yeah.
He is a focal point in bringing Japanese culture to Western audiences.
Yeah, manga. He brought the manga.
He invented the Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
Kinda. It's like without Frank Miller, the Ninja Turtles wouldn't exist. Like, he is this focal point, and it's all contained in this just, like, very skinny, like, New England kid that made his way to New York City at age 21 because he was the fifth of 7 kids, the son of a carpenter.
Yes.
And he made it to New York City in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, which, again, if you just want to do a quick Google search, was a nightmare zone. According to the documentary The Warriors, roving baseball gangs.
Can you dig it?
Pimps and chuds, as far as the eye can see. So just a straight-laced, smart guy, kind of a nerd. He loved comic books and was drawn to the industry, and New York is where that industry was.
When he was 16 years old, too, he wrote a letter to Marvel, and I have it right here. I'll read out loud. So it really came from a very early age. He said, "Dear this was published in The Cat #3 in 1973. He says, "Dear Marvel, wonderful. At last, a woman character with character. I, for one, am sick of the helpless female types which have cluttered up comics for so long. While I do think they are necessary and nice to look at, they don't have to be the only kind. The writing is good. The art is excellent. Keep it up." And I think that's a wonderful little prelude to some of the characters he would later come to be known for, such as Electro, which we'll get to in a little bit.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So he is, there's one thing you can say about Frank Miller, despite any of the controversies that he later engendered to himself, it's that he is a man who truly loves comic books, their unique attributes, and their unique history. And so he moves to New York. I don't know if you know this, but amateur comic book artist, not a very lucrative profession.
No.
So he was living in the dumps of the dumps in New York's lowest point. And he describes his first interview with Joe Orlando, a editor at DC Comics. He talks about this in an interview at the Joe Kubert School. He says literally he didn't have a proper portfolio. He had individual pages tied together with twine because he didn't understand how art supplies worked. This was his first meeting, and he was living in just a hovel of an apartment.
Yes, he hollowed out rats to use them as shoes, which was very disturbing for the editors that he would pitch his
and he describes Joe Orlando, who is this legendary old-timey comics guy, EC Comics, old Mad Magazine kind of guy, so kindly and with just warmth in his heart, telling him that he is talentless and will never succeed in comics. And as he's looking down at his portfolio, kind of realizing the huge step he's taken and what a mistake it might have been, a cockroach crawls out of his portfolio. Or as he called it, a water bug, which is how you know it's one of those big fuckers.
Yeah, giant ones. They can fly in Florida. But it's a nightmare.
He wasn't deterred, and he actually sought out the tutelage and guidance of Neil Adams, who is another big comics guy, another revolutionary figure.
He worked on Superman, Batman, Green Arrow, all in the Silver Age. Big deal. And he was able to get some lessons from him. Mm-hmm. He was able to get some sort of informal mentoring from this great man. And it got him a recommendation at Webster Publishing's Gold Key Comics imprint, which ran a Twilight Zone comic series for 92 issues from 1962 to 1982. That's right. I do my research. Get the fuck off my back.
Oh, but it's so comfy and lumpy up here. Let me stay.
He's credited on one Weird War Tales number 64 in a story called Deliver Me from D-Day. He worked on little stories for the Twilight Zone, like Endless Cloud and Royal Feast.
But it was a gig he did for the Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man.
Yes.
That involved Daredevil, that finally got him his big break, which was on the bi-monthly. Or wait, which one's the bad one? Bi-monthly or bi-weekly?
Bi-monthly. Yes, bi-monthly.
So bi-monthly is basically
it should have been it was downgraded to bi-monthly, which is twice a month,
right? As
opposed to a weekly situation.
Okay,
I believe.
Now bi-weekly is every 2 weeks.
Man.
I'm
having a hard... No, Jake, we have to figure this out.
Yeah, bi-monthly is bi-monthly is every 2 months. Bi-weekly is every 2 weeks.
Okay.
Basically, Daredevil...
Refer to your bi-month sci-fi con for more.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good ref. Daredevil was on its last legs.
I recently came out as bi-monthly. Yes, and that was a big step for me.
So you're attracted to women and months.
Months of the year. I've been kind of gunning for March. We'll see what happens. But definitely September. I've been banging since 2008.
Nice.
I think. Yeah. Shitty month to fuck. I'll tell you what. Always wants to try to feed you hamburgers after. Jake, I'm sorry. I've derailed this entire show.
I never apologize for talking about fucking the month of September while it force feeds you hamburgers. You hear me, Holden?
All right, damn it.
This run of Daredevil is what many people consider one of the most groundbreaking runs in comic book history.
Now, have you read it?
I've only seen bits and pieces. Honestly, the most I actually read only came later when I picked up the graphic novel package for his Return to Glory, which will come later. But
yes,
this series it had a harder edge. Instead of Matt Murdock is not a power fantasy for the most part. His abilities are he's not very blind. But Frank Miller's art style was very dynamic and had a lot of motion and action and weight to it.
And he just brought in the samurai, shogun, kung fu film influences into Daredevil, which was completely new at the time. And along with that came the manga influences that he had when he was younger. He was reading Lone Wolf and Cub before they were translated.
Yeah.
So it was like his favorite thing, and he just only went by the art to tell the story, which again, I think is a strong indicator of the kind of work he would go on to do. And I do feel like you could read a Sin City and really know exactly what was going on without any text.
Yeah, the fight choreography, Daredevil was a street-level rumbler kind of character, and the fight scenes were legendary. He gave each character kind of a very, like, it's not operatic, but everyone had this epic inner monologue. Everyone from the reporter Ben Urich to the Kingpin, who was like, he was like a classic mob boss kind of guy, but they kind of brought in that 80s like conglomerate corporation, evil Wall Street kind of figure. They brought in Elektra, who is not like the damsel in distress, but a female anti-hero that, is like sexy and dangerous and is kind of moves independently from Matt Murdock, even though when push comes to shove, like, you gotta make out a little.
He created the character, correct?
Elektra, yeah.
Yes, right? So, and
also, it wasn't until like today that I realized Electra complex, daddy issues, of course, I'm an idiot.
There you go.
I mean, I thought it was like, yeah, Greek ninja.
That's, same with Oedipus Boy. I couldn't believe I couldn't figure that out. I mean, it was way more spelled out.
He didn't invent Oedipus Boy until Dark Knight Part 3.
Yeah, Dark Knight 3, Dark Knight gets nasty with it, which people really did not like.
I mean, the cover by Andy Kubert is great, but other than that, it's...
an upside-down Batman. I mean, what even is that, right? I mean, it's just stupid. It's just Batman walking on his hands.
But it elevated... The point is that there's a lot of classic stories. The villains are shown sympathetically. The character of the Gladiator is, this, like, dumb Greek-themed, like, Bruiser character that, actually gets help with a social worker and, like, reforms. And there's street-level toughs, like Turk, that keep showing up. Like, it's this very organic world, and it, instead of just being like, pow, kablooey, that Frank Miller style narration where it's like, my fist explodes in his side. I feel the third rib burst beneath my knuckle, which is like fucking way different than like here's a little chin music ne'er-do-well.
And one more thing about Elektra that I found to be interesting. He jokingly said in an interview that he ripped off Will Eisner's The Spirit for the story. There's a story called Sand Seraph about one of the Spirit's first loves who went on to become a jewel thief. Now, do you know a lot about the Spirit? Of course, we'll hear more about the Spirit later in this episode. I guess it was just like an old-timey detective novel. Cartoon strip.
Okay, so Will Eisner is a very talented cartoonist and
Is he the namesake for the Eisner Award?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Jewish immigrant, and he predates like Marvel DC comic books and was actually kind of the progenitor of it because the newspaper strips would run these big color Sunday supplementals.
Yes, yeah.
And so The Spirit was kind of the first full color masked adventurer long form story that a lot of people that ended up working at comics were exposed to. So he got to write the rules and kind of got to explore this new frontier of storytelling that hadn't been done before.
And it was very noir-y, right?
Yeah, you have trench coats and dames and
directly trace Sin City, Dark Knight Returns, all of these things, even this Daredevil stuff, back to Lone Wolf and Cub and The Spirit. Probably those two, if you could imagine that manga and that comic book having sexual intercourse with each other, and then a weird goo comes out of it, and that would be the sort of the work of Frank Miller.
I envy Frank Miller for getting his hands on those mangas, because he loved comic books. I love comic books. Marcus, super producer Marcus Parks in the studio, as always.
Hello.
Imagine if, all of a sudden someone handed you a cassette tape and it had, a new kind of punk music.
Ah.
That broke all the established rules that you had learned, and then, but it was somehow even better than everything you had heard before it.
So Gogo Bordello.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that's the thing is it's a whole new bag of tricks. It's a completely separate tradition that it's two different. It's literally an ocean apart. These two comic book industries, and so working in American comics, he now had these like tricks and techniques and even just like panel arrangements that no one else was using.
Yeah, definitely the
ninjas.
Yes, and ninjas.
He had ninjas.
And the
No one
panel
else had
arrangements,
ninjas.
for sure. As I'm dipping back into, can I say manga? I want to say manga, but I thought I was supposed to say manga to not sound like an idiot.
Oh, I have no fear about sounding. I love Japanimation. My favorite mangas.
Okay, cool. I'll say manga. That's what I want to say, but I was just like, oh, I think everybody pronounces it manga, which is just a pain in the ass to
I
say.
want you to close your close your eyes, and in your mind's eye, imagine the exact person that would actually take the time to be like, actually, it's pronounced manga. Like, look at him. Do you care what he thinks?
It's me as a woman. That was the most upsetting part about what just happened. So this revitalizes Daredevil and kind of changes comic books a little bit. This whole situation, right? I mean, and he eventually kills off Elektra in issue number 181, and finishes the whole thing in issue 191 in 1983, and goes on to some other shit.
He literally took the garbage heap of Marvel Comics and turned it into the #1 selling book. He then gets snapped up by DC, and they let him go nuts on his own creator-owned book, which at the time was a very novel thing. Like this is the beginning of the artist and writer as celebrity kind of thing, and that was Ronin.
Yes,
which
Ronin.
I never got a hold of, but basically it was.
I want to read it now. I've done this research. I'm dying to read it now.
More samurai, more ninjas, more like alt future stuff. He basically just says it was him cutting loose with all the cool techniques that he was seeing in Japanese comics and in European comics, like the work of Mobius is that kind of like freaky, sensual European comic vibe.
And Mobius will come up actually later in this episode. Just going to say, just give a kind of a little roundabout of what Ronin is all about. You're going to hear this phrase multiple times in this episode, in a dystopian near future.
That's my least favorite kind of near future.
You're going to hear that so many times in this episode. A Ronin is reincarnated. Now, a Ronin is a samurai without a lord or master. And these were termed for these types of people. This is during the feudal period, which is 1185 to 1868 in Japan. It was kind of an interesting thing. A Ronin became masterless through the death of his master or the loss of his master's favor. And Ronin actually translates to wave man, which is essentially a person that is socially adrift. Japanese, man, they crazy.
Oh, we bowled over this, and I feel dumb, but also for Marvel, he did the first 4 issues of the Wolverine miniseries with Chris Claremont, which not only made Wolverine way cooler than he already was and kind of established him as his own like powerhouse and like cultural icon, but he introduced even more crazy Japanese stuff in that story.
Yeah, my brother has number 2 all packaged up in pristine condition.
Just the that iconic image of Wolverine popping the claws and like doing that like come here finger, like just with a shit-eating grin on his face.
Yeah, man.
It's also where they introduced Wolverine's clever disguise, patches.
That's when he's got an eye patch.
This is a guy, eye patch, which is different than Batman's cool disguise, matches, which is when Batman is just chewing on a match. That's like 1983 to 84.
Yeah.
But it's 1985, 86 is when it's the late 80s.
Frank Miller goes Super Saiyan.
He goes fucking Super Saiyan.
He creates a spirit bomb called Dark Knight Returns. It's heavily inspired by the Dirty Harry film Sudden Impact, which I should go back and watch, in which Dirty Harry comes out of retirement. Mm-hmm. And Miller's own aging was an inspiration as well. He was 29 at the time, which makes me furious.
No, he turned 30, and Batman is perpetually 29.
Yes, all of a sudden I realized I was about to turn 29 years old.
Oh, wait, what?
Batman's age.
Okay, never mind.
Then I realized I was 1 year. You're wrong, Jake.
I'm wrong.
Then I realized I have too much coffee in me. Then I realized I was 1 year away from turning older than Batman. The more this year went on, the more it bothered me. You're kind of right, Jake. That I might be older than him. So finally, I decided to fix that and make him older than me once and for all. So I conceived of a story where Batman was at the impossibly old age of 50.
Honestly, I can't even imagine that someone is listening to this right now that hasn't read Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah, it was sort of okay. So I talked about there were like 3 different comic books that were handed to me during my like coming back to comics in actually 4 probably. Yeah, 4 coming back to comics in college. Those comics would be in this order: Dark Knight Returns, The Watchmen, the first trade of Jesus God of Dream of Sandman. Jeez Lord, and the first trade of Preacher. It was Dark Knight Returns specifically, though, brought me back into comic books, and I think it has that power to bring anyone into comic books who've been away, who have never experienced them on that level.
Mm-hmm. The Silver Age Batman. Batman had always, like, by this time, Batman was darker. Like, he wasn't, just wearing rainbow suits. And
you had your Neil Adams before this, who kind of darkened it up, gave him the gray suit.
Right. But there wasn't a reason for an average person to pick up a just normal issue of Batman. This was a special prestige format. Instead of like staples and 4-color, this was, square bound. This was an event, and it was marketed as like, this ain't your daddy's Batman. Like this was a special comics event, which was rare at the time. Now everything's a special event, and the art was unlike anything that you had seen. The coloring was beautiful with Lynn Vart.
Who he would was he married to her at the time?
They were together. His partner at the time. I don't know if they were married. The way that it reflected like the modern politics of the 80s.
Lynn Varley.
Mm-hmm. The way that there was like talking heads and cable news and like the media was part of the story. The way that the fear of inner city gangs and like the corruption of the youth was manifested through the mutants who literally spoke in like a digital, undecipherable slang.
The crazy 16-panel pages, I felt like what was a big difference. Just there was so much that could happen on a page, and then it would just be like one single image on the next. So they played with layout in a pretty cool way.
And the presentation of Batman not as like a super detective, but as a terrifyingly crazy old man. His broken dialogue, the way that each action on the page would usually be punctuated by like, muscles burn like 1,000 fires. Stupid old man. Think you still got the knees of a kid. Like,
like a real Batman, like a Batman that felt more like a real ass person, than he had in a very long time. A real person who was over the hill, which made the stakes way higher in all of these fights. Like, oh, this is a Batman that they could totally kill off if they wanted to, and a Lady Robin.
Oh, Cassie.
Lady Robin. I loved the little changes like that, And again, going back to that letter that Frank Miller wrote back in the day, just coming up with like a cool, strong female comic book character that wasn't just like like tits with a human attached to it.
No, he saves that for Catwoman. There's shit in there that, now fucked up Batman is something you can easily find, but like the Joker just like cackling as he snaps his own neck through force of will is like, that'll fucking stick with you, man. You're just like, what the hell? This is fucking amazing. I think one of the most quoted as like influential holy shit moments in comic book history is the last issue where Superman and Batman slug it out in fucking Crime Alley. It's just cathartic. It breaks past the history of comics up until that point, but also is like the culmination of the history of comics at that point.
That perfect kind of meeting point for before and after, for sure. That comic kind of has it all, right?
Yeah. And it also introduced kind of this new archetype because, you know, instead of like slender, acrobatic, like cool Justice Dad, like new Batman was built like a truck.
Yeah,
And
huge,
he was
beefy.
just a human truck.
Grizzled, just covered in cracks, like just like a cracked earth. He was like the Thing, the Batman.
You know, Rob Liefeld's Cable is literally just old Bruce Wayne with a robot arm and some shoulder pads. Like the design is nearly identical. It's you know, but with that and Watchmen coming out at basically the same time, it changed everything. And even with all the like caveats of, with all, even with everything being like edgy, cool, darkness, it's still a really good comic. It is still fundamentally a good comic that is worth reading.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
It's just so weird.
Yeah.
I mean, Frank Miller doesn't get enough credit for just being weird, unsettlingly weird, like the weird gas baby. Yeah, that kills everyone.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I forgot about
the weird flying gas baby. You forgot. That's how weird it is. You forgot about a weird flying gas baby that kills a studio audience.
I was so focused, obviously, on the Nazi machine gun lady with swastikas on her boobs.
Yeah, it's just a fantastic read. Highly recommend, and everyone should go back and read it again if you haven't in a while.
At the same time, over at Marvel, he was working with David Mazzucchelli on his glorious return to Daredevil called Born Again, which kind of was this. This wasn't prestige format. This was just individual issues of Daredevil, but it was a 7-part story that reads like a graphic novel.
Shows his Catholic upbringing, his fall and rise with Kingpin.
So, in classic Frank Miller fashion, it turns out that Karen Page, who was once the loyal like Gal Friday of Matt Murdock, moved to Los Angeles to become an actress, immediately gets hooked on heroin, and she sells Matt Murdock's name to a Mexican drug dealer for a single hit of heroin. And it makes its way to the Kingpin, who finally has the information he needs, not to get his revenge on Daredevil, but to like utterly break him. And it's the book goes into a lot of the Kingpin's own personal thought process on how he wants to like relish in destroying Daredevil. That like he looks at Matt Murdock as like this gleam of uncompromising goodness that he knows in his heart can't be, and he has to crush it. Also, a lot of the book is just the Kingpin, just like, you know how the Kingpin is this big fat bald guy, but the clutch is that it's all muscle.
Yeah.
So he's just like lifting weights, and there's like this brilliant shot of like the Kingpin planning his next step against Daredevil, but he's like doing it while just fighting a bunch of karate dudes in a red Speedo. Yeah. It's a very...
I love that panel.
It comes out of nowhere. It's like that's just like, time to put on my red Speedo and fight a bunch of karate dudes. But it's maybe it's like an amazing first issue because, again, we talk about heroes with real problems, and what the Kingpin does is he doesn't send an assassin. He doesn't break his legs. Within one day, Matt Murdock finds out that none of his mortgage payments have been reaching the bank. The IRS is auditing him and freezing his assets, and then his house blows up in a gas fire. So now he's just homeless and false, and he gets a subpoena for being falsely accused for trying to bribe a cop. So like he loses his house and his job and his money. So now now he's just a fucking schlub in Hell's Kitchen again.
Yeah, just starting from the very beginning. I know there's one panel, too. You just flip the page. It just says, fuck. Giant letters.
In the book, Karen Page is just this tweaked out heroin addict who just is constantly being like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so weak. I hate myself for being a woman. And there's also a character named Glory who is who was Matt Murdock's like Irish girlfriend. You can tell she's Irish because in almost every panel she's like, Core, this is just like Belfast during the Troubles. You know, where I'm from, where there's violence.
Oh, it's cold outside. So cold outside. I might come down with the consumption.
I need to.
But it's okay because she hooks up with Foggy Nelson. It's about time the chubby one got a hot Irish girlfriend.
Who names their kid Foggy?
Old-timey people.
That is true. Old-timey people.
This is also a really good book. It's not as like landmark as Dark Knight Returns. It doesn't have that same weird energy. It's just kind of like good meat and potatoes storytelling. But still on fire. Frank
Speaking
Miller,
of origin
still
stories,
on fire.
I think if I think what you're leading up to is what you're leading up to.
Yes.
Batman Year One, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so good.
So it's the definitive Batman origin story.
Yep.
It's Batman Begins is like they were like, why would we even bother telling a story different than this?
Yep, one of DC's best-selling books of all time. Shows Batman's early crime-fighting career as well as his budding partnership with James Gordon.
I like the Commissioner Gordon segments like more than the Batman segments.
Yeah.
Because it's just like it's such a believable. Just every single time you were just trying to do the right thing, and every force on earth is being like, "Oh, come on, man, fuck you." Like it's such a relatable character, and Mazzucchelli is a brilliant artist. He doesn't have like the flair that Miller has, but he just has so much solid understanding of how the page works.
What else did Mazzucchelli work on? Do you know?
He worked on the Daredevil story that we
Okay.
just talked about. He has he's done a lot of graphic novels. One of my favorite is one called Asterios Polyp, which is
Oh my God, I love that.
yeah,
Oh, that's him?
that is him.
Holy fuck, I love Asterios Polyp. Have
It's-
you ever read that, Marcus?
Nuh-uh.
Oh, everybody should read that. It's so good.
I've never even heard of it.
Yeah, it's amazing. That's like has the crazy layouts.
Yeah, it's.
And
I mean,
it's like a love story, right? About an old
ostensibly,
man.
it's a love story about an architecture professor, but really, it's just Mazzucchelli just like fucking pumping steroids directly into his neck and showing the world this is what you can do with a page and a pen.
Oh, it's unbelievable. Are you looking at like little?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
It's amazing, and I
Really cool
loved
art.
the story. I remember loving the story.
Yeah.
It's out in a really cool edition. It's like a hardback. It looks great. It's just the whole thing. I had such a great experience reading that. That's him. That's amazing.
Batman Year One, another. We know. It's pick it up. You won't doubt it. Like
Batman Year One, motherfuckers.
depending on how you feel about that kind of like gruff, angry, weird Frank Miller energy, you might want to pick that up before Dark Knight Returns. But that's up to you. But so Frank is killing it.
Bookending Batman's life, you know, in a wonderful way.
Redefining the character, showing he's got the biggest stick in comics. So that means it's time for Frankie to go to Hollywood.
Yeah.
Relax. Don't do well when you want to be blue.
Well, he also goes rogue as a motherfucker. So what happens is he... I guess motherfucker, by the way, word of the day for this podcast.
Motherfucker.
I keep saying it a lot.
If you can get it down to one syllable, you win.
So while he's kicking ass, motherfucker. While he's kicking ass, DC Comics is like, nah, we're DC Comics and we're mean and mad. This is literally a quote I read. We're mean and mad and we're bad and big. We have to have a rating system. And then Frank Miller was like, and you know, whatever.
Frank, we're
You
not
didn't
trying to
say
censor
the magic word.
Yeah, you didn't say the magic word.
Frank, we're not trying to censor you. We just want 30% less whores in your comics.
And Alan Moore's like, oh, 30% less whores. Well, how about a dash of chaos magic sprinkles?
Ah, my eyes. That's just cayenne pepper.
Alan Moore, Frank Miller, some other writers, artists got pissed off altogether about this. And Frank Miller was just straight up like, see you later, son, you know, and walked out the door and went off to bigger and better things, a.k.a. sweet, sweet, delicious Hollywood.
So obviously people are banging down this guy's door. He is the it kid, and he gets to work on one of the most iconic franchises of the 1980s. He gets to work on RoboCop 2 and 3.
Whoa! Well, we don't need to really talk about 3 that much, but RoboCop 2
2.
fucking rules.
I'm sorry. How many jetpacks are in RoboCop 2? Is it
None.
Oh, so I guess we got to talk about RoboCop 3 then.
Yeah, but how much nuke does RoboCop 3 have? Huh? How many 80s stereotypical 80s punks does it have?
It's hilarious.
It's so funny.
RoboCop 2 is so funny.
I just watched it a couple of months ago. It's fucking hilarious.
Yeah, it's great.
Funnier. RoboCop 1 is better, but RoboCop 2 is funny.
Wait, isn't the whole point? Isn't the plot of RoboCop 2 about why it's a bad idea to try and recreate RoboCop? Like, isn't that literally the plot?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, but what is it? Don't try to badly recreate RoboCop by using the soul of a dead evil drug dealer.
Yeah.
And also, children shouldn't be drug dealers, but sometimes they can be good at it.
Oh, is RoboCop 2 or 3 the one with the 12-year-old drug dealer?
2.
Okay.
Yeah, and he's actually really good. Usually, I hate kids in movies. That's awesome. It's really good.
How dare they ruin the film franchise that started with the first one where a gangster gets his fucking nuts shot off? I mean, what are we tainting here? You know, I thought 2 was legitimately a funny movie.
It was,
and everybody here listening to it should watch the second one first.
You watch the first one first. The second, you can watch them in order.
It's like Godfather, though. I think it's just like Godfather. You could argue that maybe 2 is better than 1. Some could argue.
Some could argue.
It's very different from 1, and then 3 sort of jumps the shark entirely.
3's awful. Jetpack, little girl sidekick. It's the worst.
But
if RoboCop is gonna have a kid in a movie, he'd better kill the kid.
It's a RoboCop 3, because I don't even know if I've seen RoboCop 3. It's like a buddy movie with a little kid.
Yeah,
right?
She's a hacker.
Yeah, she's like so many children in the 90s. She was a homeless hacker.
Right.
Yeah, and then there was an evil a ninja. Yeah, there was a
Frank
ninja
Miller.
robot that came over from Japan.
Got to be a ninja robot.
Yeah.
He said there was a lot of interference in the writing process. It wasn't ideal. After working on the 2 RoboCop movies, I really thought that that was it for me in the business of film.
He, in multiple interviews, this is a quote that will stick with me, is he compares the act of screenwriting for a major motion picture as the act of working your balls off to install a fire hydrant while watching all the dogs line up for a turn to piss on it.
I bet, man. I bet that is not too far off, especially a big film franchise like that. But while he was kind of after DC and Hollywood, yada, 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 he's like, I want to do things for me. Mm-hmm. All right. So he ends up teaming up with Dark Horse Comics. And
the way he describes it as he was terrified of returning to comics after his big break and kind of a shameful falling out with Hollywood. So he wanted to prove that he still got the chops. And he was scared that he didn't know how to draw beautiful women and cool-looking cars. So whatever he was going to do, he insisted that those would be in the next book. And that book was...
Hard Boiled.
Yeah.
Was it?
I was going to say Sin City, but it's all there.
Yeah, same difference. Near dystopian future, all that good stuff. Yeah. So his the first project he worked on was actually Hard Boiled, which I do want to highlight because I thought it was pretty fascinating. He wrote it from 90 to 92 with the artist Jeff Darrow. Now, this is where Mobius comes into play. Mm-hmm. Jeff Darrow was a student at Hanna-Barbera Studios, and he was introduced to Miller by the French comic book writer-artist Mobius, who worked on Alien, Tron, Fifth Element, Abyss. This dude is the man.
We could do a whole episode on
Mobius. And together, I thought this was interesting for anybody who wanted to go check it out. Darrow.
I say Darrow.
Darrow and Mobius. Darrow and Mobius were end up working together on a portfolio of prints called Les Cités Feux, or City of Fire. It's 8 prints in a single kind of package together. These really cool just spreads with a lot of detail of these big cityscapes and weird. It's just like an alien world. It kind of seems like an alien city. There were only 500 copies made, so it's one of Mobius's rarest publications. So Mobius introduces Darrow to Frank Miller, And they ended up working on this near-distant dystopian future story about a tax collector named Nixon who finds out he's actually a robot assassin and sets out to get his revenge.
I hate when that happens.
I know, right? It's super cool sounding. I read like the plot outline. It was definitely one of the major works that I wanted to go out and grab as soon as I'm done working on this episode. It won the Eisner Award that year for writer-artist, I think in 1990. And he also worked on another story called Give Me Liberty. Have you guys heard of this?
Martha Washington?
Yes.
I could not find like a copy in time for this episode, but
Looks awesome.
yeah. It kind of breaks the mold that like, that Frank Miller kind of is, he's known for just like gruff old white dudes in gruff cities punching drug dealers, but like this is the story. Yeah, a dystopian future.
Dystopian near future. All right, so get that in your heads right. Picture that right now. Come with me down the rabbit hole.
So you're saying it's the future, but bad?
But soon-ish and very sad and mean. The U.S. is split into extremist factions. It's the protagonist, Martha Washington. You watch her rise from a housing project and go on to become a war hero and change the fate of the U.S. It looks fascinating. It's in 4 parts. Looks really cool. I definitely want to check it out.
The thing I heard that I literally was desperate for information on this series, so that I just called a friend of mine that's really into comics, and I was like, "What's the deal with Martha Washington?" He's like, "Well, the thing about Martha Washington is that Frank Miller has worked on it so sporadically that like the first few issues, you can tell he's still like young and liberal, and like by the end of like the most recent chapters, she's like blowing away terrorists."
Yeah. He I think Martha Washington Goes to War, I believe, is some of the later works he's done with it. It's something that he has kind of come back to. And so I definitely wanted to highlight those before we get into the big fucking meat on the table right now, which would definitely be his work on Sin City.
Hey kids, you like tits and large swaths of black?
I like one of those two things.
Do you like big men in big coats punching hookers?
Or like all of those 4 things.
Do you like watching a weird clown man getting his nuts ripped out of his body?
I'm just going to go back to tits. It's, yeah. Sin City, what do we say, Jake? I mean, it's first of all, I want to highlight he wrote and illustrated the whole thing. And a lot of people are probably familiar with it, especially at least with the film that came out.
Films,
plural, that came out. Almost all in black and white. If there's color in it, it's used to like highlight a character or something. Most prolifically in That Yellow Bastard, which I made fun of earlier. And it was really brilliant stuff. I remember Sin City really blew me out of the water when I first read it. Just the use of positive and negative light to illustrate things. It's very brilliantly done in that sense, in an artistic sense, using the use of negative space.
It's proof that if you put aside your other concerns and just make something that you want to see, it will probably resonate with a lot of people.
Yes. If
you kind of put the sensors and the suits aside and you're just like, what do I like? What's a story that's deep in me that I want out there? Even if it doesn't look like anything else, even if it's, a tone and like a subject matter that has long been kind of set aside, it works. If you believe in it, it works.
I think too, it's the most direct and pure marriage of the manga noir sensibilities, right? I think you see that the most in the Sin City series. Originally ran in Dark Horse Presents, which was one of the first things that Dark Horse did.
Okay.
Dark Horse was just one dude who opened up a comic book shop called Pegasus Books in 1980. He used the money from that. This guy, Mike Richardson in Milwaukee, Oregon, he used the money from that to found Dark Horse Comics in 86. Dark Horse, of course, would go on to have Hellboy, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Mass Effect, the comic book, all these licensed comic books, Aliens, Predator. Here's a good callback to another episode. Legend of Zelda, Hyrule Historia was the English translation was produced through Dark Horse. There's a ton of manga. Akira, Berserk, which I'm reading right now and loving right now. Lone Wolf and Cub, which Miller would end up drawing the covers of the first 12 issues of Lone Wolf and Cub, his childhood fucking favorite manga. I think that is super cool, and we'll talk about it a little bit, but he would also go on, kind of unfortunately, to direct The Spirit, the film, which I love, though, that he got to eventually, like, have his hand in these things that made him who he was as a child.
So, the 90s were basically pretty much full, like... Sin City was pretty much his main output.
Yeah.
And it was like this...
The Hard Goodbye, A Dame to Kill For, That Yellow Bastard.
And then the dark times happened.
Ooh.
Listen, it happens to us all. Some would say it's happening to me actively as we speak.
Well, I like the Sin City movie.
The Sin City
movie's great.
I saw it in the theater. I enjoyed it.
In interviews, hearing Frank Miller talk about making the Sin City movies, there is a sparkle in his eye that is like undeniable. His experiences, having his work so shat upon in RoboCop kind of get washed away because there's a room full of highly trained professionals that are all looking to him for guidance. He is the word of God. He is the director. Co-director
with Robert Rodriguez, who he was so reluctant to get back into Hollywood after his experience with the RoboCop stuff. And Robert Rodriguez flew him out to, I believe they were making this
Texas.
in Austin, right? So that's where Robert Rodriguez's camp is. He flew him out to shoot a proof of concept for the story The Customer Is Always Right, which is a short story in Sin City. And Miller was so pleased with that experience, and that ended up actually being the used as the opening scene of the film. But he just found from that little taste that he could actually work with Robert Rodriguez. And I think Robert Rodriguez could kind of handle some of the things that he wouldn't be able to handle, but he got to explain entire backstories to his actors, give them, in-depth motivation for their scenes. And it was just a wonderful experience for him, especially the first one.
And we glossed over his other big movie project, 300.
Yes,
300 was a graphic novel, a hardcover graphic novel with beautiful colors, amazing compositions, and a very unlikely setting of ancient Sparta at the Battle of Thermopylae, which this is a story he had always wanted to tell because there's like an old black and white movie version that he watched when he was a kid, and apparently when we think of
it's a film called The 300 Spartans.
When we think of the Frank Miller protagonist, that like gruff, violent yet quiet, steady, like do what has to be done caricature, it's always been King Leonidas in the back of his head. And so when he made 300, it was his idea to like retell the story as grand as it is in his own imagination. And Zack Snyder incredibly faithfully brought that book to the screen. It's incredible. To see, it's a comic book in full motion.
Full disclosure, I have not seen 300.
What?
Yeah, it's crazy.
I haven't either.
What? How?
I don't know.
I read it. I actually
You did? How could you read it and not see? I didn't read it.
I read
either.
it when it was coming out. I read it in single issues.
I would just.
It came out when we were in high school.
Yeah. I haven't read it. I haven't seen it. It's crazy. It got a lot of criticism for not being historically accurate.
Yeah, but like, who cares? Fucking ab dudes fucking stab Persians. British ab guys, ancient Greeks, stab various brown people in jingly janglies. Mysterious Eastern jingly janglies.
There's big monsters in it and stuff, right?
Yeah, there's monster people.
Of course.
Like you got back in the day. But it's. I'm not going to say, like, despite all my New York liberalness, I'm not going to say that fucking cool burly soldiers being like, no, democracy will not fall, is like not fucking adrenaline fuel.
Yeah, I promise the listening audience I will go and watch 300. Very divisive film, though, I found.
Yeah.
Like, people either love it or hate it. I guess that's Zack Snyder is a very divisive director.
Zack Snyder's a very divisive guy, and I didn't start joining like a CrossFit gym afterwards like half the people that watched it. But it's kind of just regular bro fuel. It's fine.
The biggest thing I feel like we glossed over was in '94 when Miller returned to writing superhero comics. He did it with motherfucking Spawn, issue number 11, and he also did the Batman Spawn crossover. Boy, bow, bow, bow.
Tear it down. Tear it all down.
Bow, bow, bow.
Yeah, let me give you a little bit of example of dialogue from Batman Spawn.
Yeah.
This might be Spawn Batman.
Yeah.
Because it was Spawn Batman and Batman Spawn.
That's right.
Is this before or after Batman finds a bunch of human heads inside of robot crabs?
That was Miller's.
Yeah. This is Batman and Spawn fighting, and Spawn says, "Talking trash. You're talking trash. It won't help you." And then Batman replies, "No discipline. Stupid fighter. Stupid punk." And that's most of the dialogue. Have you guys read?
A lot of punk.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of punk talk.
A lot of punk.
It's like Shakespeare. Unlike any other comic book crossover rather, comic book, they fight it first, and then they realize they have a common enemy, and they team up. Man, one of the freshest things I've heard in crossover comics in a long time.
There is a really cool panel of Spawn with a batarang just jammed in his face.
It's the last panel. It's the very last panel.
I remember that.
Because Batman's like, "I'm getting out of here. See you later." And then he just splacks him in the face. with batarang.
Splack is the best
Splack.
verb.
Oh, man. Kill
It usually means something much different.
Motherfucker, what?
But yeah, the film. I mean, the Sin City film. What can I say? It was. I think that this was the most telling thing about the movie itself, because I felt this way when I went to see the film after reading a bunch of Sin City. Robert Rodriguez said he wasn't trying to make an adaptation; he was trying to make a translation, like a direct. I mean, it was storyboard to film. It was the first time I saw that in a movie, where it was literally the exact storyboard of the movie was clearly the comic. I mean, it was. And also at the time, it was one of the only just 100% digital live action films.
Oh, yeah.
Like almost all of it was green screen. The 3 sets, which was like the strip club or whatever. These are like handmade sets in studio. They used like a crazy high def digital camera combined with green screen, it was the first time you kind of saw that. And it was filmed in color and then converted to black and white, which was a lot of kind of why you get this very specific look that movie has.
I just remember Frodo Baggins being fucking creepy as shit.
Yeah, dude. Well, I had read all of these stories before I'd seen Sin City in the theater, probably like in the same summer, and I just remember just feeling like it was like right on, like it was 100% what I had read in the comic book. Marcus, what are you laughing about?
I was looking on Google. When you type in Spawn Batman, like, you know how there's like the autofills? One of the autofills is just badass.
Fuck yeah, dude. I bet oh man, Miller and McFarlane fucking hammering. Like, who was on drums, who was on guitar? You know what I'm saying? Like, they didn't write and draw it. They probably just made music.
They
probably
just punched each other and the blood splatters, forms the pencils.
created the page. 110% adrenaline.
All it is just Batman talking about fighting Spawn, and then Spawn talking about fighting Batman while they fight with each other.
All right, fine. We're going to do an entire episode on Spawn Batman crossover. It's going to happen. We will go page for page and analyze every single page.
The Wizard and the Bruiser reading series. Proudly Wizard and the Bruiser book club.
Yeah, Wizard and the Bruiser book club.
And nothing of value, just raw trash.
Yeah, just Spawn Batman, and then you can read Batman Spawn, War Devil.
So you were talking about the Dark Times. Now, are you talking about? I mean, the next SimCity: A Dame to Kill For was I never saw it.
I never saw. I hear it wasn't as good, but I hear Eva Green kills it as like the fucking Miller betraying broad.
Nice.
But he comes back for Dark Knight Strikes Again.
Yeah, I thought that might be where you were heading with this. I never read it. I just heard it was not good. So
it was. Looking back on it now, I respect all the weird risks it took. Like Lynn Varney or Varley. I'm so bad at this. Lynn, his longtime partner in colors. Switched to all.
Varley.
Varley switched to all digital, and unfortunately, instead of like opening up these new avenues, it's just really sloppy, bad Photoshop, like coloring jobs. the art takes this weird turn where it's all like very blocky and simplified. There's a whole scene where like Wonder Woman and Superman bang so hard that like they kill half the Earth's population through tidal waves and volcanoes.
He's getting older. Also, he was in Hell's Kitchen. He moved there in 2001. Perfect timing. Moved back to New York in 2001. So yeah, he was kind of in a weird place, I think, during the writing of that.
There's also All-Star Batman and Superman, which was it was supposed to be DC's big strike back against Marvel, who were killing it on the Ultimate line, which we could do a whole fucking episode on the Ultimate Marvel line.
Sure.
And so it was this dream team of a Batman book with Frank Miller writing and Jim Lee drawing. But this is like all the bad, like, do you know about like the I'm the goddamn Batman meme?
No.
Oh my God.
These are the comics where like Batman is literally a crazy person. It's just there's no logic to anything. The plot goes into all these weird directions. Characters are unrecognizable, and Batman is just a grinning psychopath.
Yeah. Well, he's in, I think it's issue 2, Batman rescues Robin from the circus, and it's supposed to be like more of it, like kind of a, year one type thing, but like back at the beginning, it's like, and Frank Miller's like, if Batman was real, then he'd be a bit of a psychopath. He'd be a bit unhinged before he finally, got his bearings. And so he's driving away Robin in the Batmobile.
Robin just saw his family die.
And Robin said, who the hell are you, anyway, giving out orders like this? And Batman, without even looking at him, screams, what? Are you dense? Are you retarded or something? Who the hell do you think I am? I'm the goddamn Batman!
Edgy.
Super edgy. Yeah, this was like 2005, I think.
That was when his marriage fell apart. He got divorced from Lynn Varley in 2005, so I'm going to maybe throw it out there that he was a bit unhinged himself while he was writing that.
Yeah, 2005. I will admit, I was working at a comic book store at that time, and as soon as that comic came out, are you retarded? I'm the goddamn Batman was just like something that we would say. It's like, hey man, you want some Sonic for lunch? Are you retarded? I'm the goddamn Batman. Of course I want some Sonic for lunch.
I just remember there was like the issues took forever to come out. Like they would like spring on you like months apart. There was like a weird thing where Batman like tricked the Green Lantern into entering an apartment he furnished entirely in yellow shit. Like the chairs were yellow. He was wearing a yellow costume. He was drinking lemonade. Just to fuck with Green. It was basically Psycho Batman gleefully fucks with the DC universe.
I want to like analyze it and like find the connections to his divorce. Like I'm sure they're in there, it's all in there, like underneath everything.
There was also, I'm sure there was other stuff, but Holy Terror. Do you know about Holy Terror?
Not at all.
So again, 2001, not a great time.
Not a great time.
A lot of comic publishers put out compilations of how their individual writers and artists responded to the tragedy. If you ever track those down, they're actually incredible like works of comic art and like a very raw snapshot of that exact moment in time. And for DC's edition, Frank Miller just put out this like really fucking like dark, inky, like small story that was like, I'm sick of gods. I'm sick of fucking everything. Like it was like real. It was raw as shit. And so his publisher was like, what do you want to do? Like, and Frank Miller was like, what if we did one of those old time war propaganda comics, like when we fought the Nazis in the 40s and Captain America would punch Hitler? What if it was Batman fighting Al Qaeda? And I forgot the name of the exact editor that greenlit this, but they were like, fuck yeah, let's do it. And it took him a while to get it done. And then that publisher left DC, and DC was like, hey, we saw some of your preliminary artwork, and it looks like Batman's shooting a bunch of weird Arab people in the head. And by Arab people, I mean hook-nosed mummies, you drew? What the fuck?
Yeah, and everyone had kind of calmed down a little bit by that point.
Yeah.
Or it's like, okay, maybe we shouldn't be being like super Islamophobic constantly.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that separate from Dark Knight 3, The Master Race?
That was even more recently.
Now, he wrote that with Brian Azzarello, who wrote 100 Bullets.
Yeah.
Oh wait, I have to tell you the last thing about Holy Terror.
Please go back to Holy Terror. I love it.
So the publisher that first greenlit the thing was like, hey, tell you what, I'm working for a new comics publisher. Take what you did, finish the story, come over and we'll publish it. And so what they did was they literally erased the ears off of Batman in the artwork. So it's just Batman with no emblem or ears. But it's definitely Batman, and he's hanging out with definitely Catwoman, but the ears have been removed. She even, like, the Catwoman character even's like, 9 lives, good thing I have a few left. And it's fucking racist as shit.
Oh, my God. So he becomes like all white men do. He became a creepy, semi-racist old man. You know.
But that's the weird thing is he's so soft-spoken and deliberate and intelligent and passionate in interviews. That like the image in my head, like before we did this episode, if you asked me like, hey, you know, what does Frank Miller sound like? I'd be like, the Fuzz City Horse, break fist bash against the nose like an old Coke bottle exploding. But you know, he's like, oh, no, it's fine. The Will Eisner was a brilliant man, and you know, the power of comics is the creative freedom it imbues each individual person, and I feel like that's a beautiful blessing on the world.
So not Alan Moore.
No, he's not Alan Moore. He's not Spooky Yuki. He definitely is like he has some weird health issue that he's never been public with, but like he's 60 years old and he looks older than Stan Lee.
He has kind of a fun relationship with Alan Moore too. At one point, he mentions a kind of what he said was a wonderful 2-day fight they had after the Killing Joke was put out because Miller had such a problem with what he did with what Moore did with the Killing Joke. They just like went back and forth for like 2 days apparently about it.
I would kill
Love
for those
to
letters.
hear that. I know, right? Like hear a transcript of that or read a transcript.
Dear Mr. Miller. No, wait, I lost the Alan Moore voice. It's like,
Crikey! Me likes chaos magic now.
He's not a slop man.
Oh, me loves me chaos magic, and me sings a song about chimney sweepings.
Ah, you bastard. The Spirit he independently directed.
Yes.
That was a weird piece of trash.
I intend to be extremely faithful to the heart and soul of the material, but it won't be nostalgic. It will be much scarier than people expect. It did not do very well. I don't believe.
I saw it in the theaters. It was a train wreck.
It looks it uses the same tech as Sin City and 300 and stuff. It has that same kind of like look and feel, right?
Right, but like he's trying to make it in this world of like 40 superheroes, but it's also like Samuel L. Jackson, like everyone's like hamming it up, but not doing a good job. I'm gonna have to rewatch it. I just remember being in the theater, being like,
probably don't.
Oh no. Why can't you be the good kind of bad?
I mean,
the first sentence of the plot synopsis is in a cat-filled mausoleum in Central City.
I just good on him though for getting to do that project because that was obviously a labor of love based on his childhood and enjoyment of the Spirit and major influence from that. So I always love to hear that somebody later in life got to kind of work on a project like that, even though it was a dumpster fire.
Eastman. Oh, one thing I don't think I barely mentioned it, but I want to get that out there. That weird trivia. The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Eastman and Laird's original comic is a very direct homage to Frank Miller's run in Daredevil, to the point where their origin is literally the same chemical accident where, young Matt Murdock pushed a blind man out of the way of a speeding isotope truck, and the same element that gave Matt Murdock his powers drained into the sewer and gave the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles their powers, or their ability, their legs, I guess. Mm-hmm. That's the power of the ninja.
Their bodies.
Their bodies. And the tone, that initial tone of like ninjas and rooftops was a direct homage to Frank Miller, to the point where, Daredevil's sensei, if you've watched the show, is a man named Stick.
Yes.
And the Ninja Turtles leader is
Splinter. There you go.
Yeah.
Super cool. Well, guys, and ladies, I think that's our Frank Miller episode. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks to all the trench coats and hookers.
Yeah. I promise I'll go see 300. And please go and rate and review us on iTunes.
We stress this every episode because it's been working. It helps.
Such a huge difference.
Like Tinkerbell, we are kept alive by the claps of those reviews.
Absolutely. So if you haven't done so already, please do that. Please just go on right now and just rate and review us. It helps us out 10, 20 fold. And you can catch me, Holdlanders Ho, on Twitch. Jake?
You can find me on Twitter at bestjakeyoung, and you can go on dorkly.com and like and share our stuff there, because it's a nice website for nice people.
Yeah. So, all right, catch you next week.
For more shows like the one you just listened to, go to cavecomedyradio.com.